The first is that we started walking a journey with SASSA and with the Department of Social Development earlier this year, where we started to attach conditions to their allocation in order to ensure that they can tighten the social grant beneficiary verification. And this is because of a lot of anecdotal evidence and some other research evidence that pointed to the fact that there seems to be a significant increase in social grant fraud. In other words, individuals who are accessing social grants who are not meant to access those social grants. As a result of increased verification by SASSA, we have identified, and will make further announcements in this regard in the MTBPS, we have identified significant savings that arise out of SASSA's efforts at tightening social grant beneficiary verification. Just by way of example, during the course of the last few months, SASSA verified about 55,000 social grant beneficiaries and found that somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 of those 55,000 were not meant to access the social grant that they were accessing. Now, in a context where we pay well above 20 million social grant beneficiaries every month, that means that there's the potential through better verification, through further introduction of improved verification methods, there's the potential for savings that can then be used to strengthen the overall social wage and strengthen the social grant system. And I think this is a very, very important avenue for us to look at how can we direct resources to areas in need by eliminating fraud within the social grant system, but also in other systems in government. The second area is the area around the targeted and responsible savings that we announced earlier this year, where we said that working with the rest of government and under the guidance of Cabinet, we are going to identify low priority or ineffective government programs that can be closed so that we can take those resources and put them to other areas of need. That process, that targeted and responsible savings process or task process has started. We will announce some initial successes in that regard at the MTBPS on the 12th of November, but it's a process that we will continue to undertake over the next few years so that we can close things that are not working, that are not effective, where there's a lot of wastage, and redirect those resources to areas in need. That's another area that could help us under this category of identifying potential fiscal resources to assist malnutrition. The third point to make there is that, of course, one can also, and this would require further technical work, but one can also review the income or means test threshold for the child support grant. The child support grant is set, the income threshold is set at around 67,000 Rand per year. For a single parent, it's 134,000 for a married couple. And the grant does reach children in higher income households, including households that exceed the annual minimum wage of 56,000 Rand per year for a 38-hour work week. It also exceeds the upper bound of the poverty line, which is set at around 19,000 Rand in 2024 prices. So the argument is that if the means test for the child support grant was lower, it could potentially free up some resources to have a higher grant value for those who are really in need. And this is another trade-off that we may want to consider. If you bring the threshold lower, you can increase the grant value. And by lowering the threshold, you are targeting those children who are absolutely in need. But through a higher grant threshold, you can then give them, through a higher grant amount, sorry, you can then give them additional resources. The final point to make here, and it links to the early point around the work by SASSA, is that we do have to increase our the registry that we have for all social grant beneficiaries. And this is work that we're doing with SASSA, with SARS, the Treasury, the Presidency, and others, where we are trying to make sure that we have an accurate sense of who actually should be in the social grant registry, so that we can properly support them, properly track them, address any double dipping, address any fraud, any wastage. And that set of work is really part of the work that the government's doing around digital transformation, and creating an effective social grant beneficiary registry, so that we can better service all social grant beneficiaries. Turning now to the what would be required if we had to increase the child support grant above the food poverty line. According to our estimations, a child support grant at the value of the food poverty line of 796 in 2024 prices would require approximately 31 billion per year, in addition to the current allocation, in order to cover the current 12 million social child support grant beneficiaries. Now, again, one then has to have within the context of the broader fiscal framework that I started with at the beginning, one then has to say, well, if we were to make a decision like this, given that we do not have the revenue that supports at the moment an additional 31 billion rand per year, and we are not able to borrow for that additional funding within the context of our fiscal sustainability objectives, what are the areas that we can get some of those funds from, should Cabinet and Parliament decide to make that decision? And I spoke to some of the areas earlier. I think there are some efficiency gains that we can make within the social grant system by better verifying beneficiaries and making sure that we spend those resources appropriately. But then there are also other programs that should be considered for closure that we will speak to in the MTBPS and in the budget, and then one can over time redirect resources under the guidance of Cabinet and Parliament to the areas that are in need. Just turning now to the next set of questions, which were around engagements between social development, basic education, and other departments on coordinated child nutrition financing. Just to make the point that from our perspective, although each department, for example, the Provincial Department of the Eastern Cape, is responsible for submitting its own budget proposals for putting together their own budget. And from a national perspective, each of the national departments put together their budgets for cabinet consideration. We consistently, as the Treasury, recommend that the departments of social development must prioritize measures that can combat child hunger and malnutrition during their provincial budget processes. We have various technical and political structures where we engage the provincial MECs for finance, as well as the provincial premiers. And as part of the current 2026 MTF budget process, when we engaged with the Department of Social Development in the Eastern Cape, we made the same submission to them in terms of how they put their budget together. So from that point of view, the message goes across. But as I've said earlier, there is a degree of freedom that is afforded both to national departments to put their own budgets together, but also to provinces. The coming now towards the end of my submission, I think there were another two areas that the Commission wanted us to touch on. The one is whether it's possible to extend the nutrition support to the ECD centers via the National School Nutrition Program. And from our perspective, we certainly support the need to strengthen nutrition support for ECD centers. However, our view is that the ECD subsidy is the most effective way to do so, rather than expanding the National School Nutrition Program to include ECD centers. And I'll come back to the ECD subsidy shortly, but let me just talk a little bit to why, in our view, expanding the National School Nutrition Program to include ECD centers is not advisable. Firstly, there are over 50,000 ECD facilities that will need nutrition support, while the National School Nutrition Program provides support to around 19,000 schools. And if we have to include the ECD facilities as well, delivering to that amount of additional sites would increase the delivery costs of the National Schools Nutrition Program quite significantly and would not be affordable under the current circumstances. An additional food handler would be required for each ECD facility. The current rate is around 18,000 Rand per food handler, and that would require another 900 million Rand per year, almost R1 billion per year, in additional fiscal resources. In addition, the majority of ECD facilities do not have safe storage or food preparation areas, and food will need to be delivered every day or every second day, and then there would be additional costs required for transporting the food that would dwarf any savings that would have been realized through bulk food purchases, for example. And the total cost, in our view, of expanding the National School Nutrition Program to include children in ECD facilities would be about 3 billion Rand over the medium term, at around 4 Rand per child, obviously for a certain number of days per year. And that figure would exclude things like the food handlers I spoke about earlier and so on. So part of the challenge here is there are very specific, it's a combination of very specific fiscal as well as logistical and other constraints that make this tricky. It is, however, our view, and this is borne out in the budget that we tabled earlier this year, that what we should do is to increase the early childhood development subsidy. The early childhood increasing the subsidy would reduce barriers to ECD enrollment. It would support nutrition, and it is, in our view, the most effective way to get nutrition, and the right kind of nutrition, to the poorest and the most vulnerable children. As the Commission would know, the fees charged by ECD centers are the primary barrier to access for children, and if we are able to increase the subsidy value, that then reduces the amount of fees required for a sustainable ECD center to operate, allowing more children to attend ECD centers where they end up benefiting from the nutrition provided. Increasing the subsidy, in our view, is therefore the most effective way to get nutrition to the children in need. In the 2025 budget, this is the budget that was tabled earlier this year and was eventually adopted by Parliament. That budget provided an addition of 10 billion Rand to the ECD conditional grant to provinces, and it allowed us to increase the value of the ECD subsidy by from 17 Rand to 24 Rand per child per day, and expand access to the ECD facilities for the poorest and the most vulnerable children. From our point of view, this is a very significant step in a very constrained fiscal environment. We all know the importance of ECD as the foundation for learning, as the foundation for education and for health and other factors. There's an enormous amount of literature supporting this, and there's an enormous amount of literature that links back performance in school to the foundational phase of ECD and learning. And so success for our educational system really starts in the ECD phase. And so this additional allocation of 10 billion rand that was proposed by the Treasury, accepted by Cabinet and by Parliament, we believe makes a significant difference. Final point from my side, Commissioner, is that the ECD conditional grant framework requires that 40% of the subsidy, of the ECD subsidy, is spent on nutrition in ECD facilities. And therefore, the 10 billion rand allocation that was made under the strict interpretation of the conditional grant framework represents a 4 billion rand allocation to nutrition because of the conditions of the grant. And that implies that we now have additional resources being spent per child per day on nutrition in ECD facilities that would not have been spent under the previous regime, where the ECD subsidy was still at 17 rand per child per day. That brings me, Commissioner, to the end of my presentation. Hopefully we've touched on all the questions that were submitted to us, and of course happy to provide any further clarity or answer any additional questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Petersen, for a very clear, comprehensive and well-meaning presentation. It's much appreciated. As I indicated earlier, then this will be the opportunity for the panel to engage with this presentation. I will start with the Provincial Manager, Dr. Carter. If I can please invite you to come in with any questions, comments, and reflections on this presentation, please.
Good morning again, Chairperson of this inquiry. Good morning again, Mr. Petersen, and thank you for your comprehensive presentation. I want to take this opportunity, though, Commissioners on the platform, to also share a document that was submitted by the Department in 2023, if you will allow me 1 second. And the reason I want to do that, Commissioners as well as Mr. Petersen, is to just perhaps take us to 1 or 2 concerns that I want to raise at this stage, and then I will engage with Mr. Petersen's presentation at large. Mr. Petersen, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I am.
Okay, wonderful. Now, thank you. This was the official response that the Commission was provided with to our then sitting Commissioner Sibanyoni. And just you can see it's more the same, the line of questioning was provided to the Commission and the answers that were provided. Now, I want to take you to 1 or 2 elements of this response. One of the concerns that the Human Rights Commission posed, and I want to quickly ask you, Mr. Petersen, have you read the full malnutrition report?
I have not read the full malnutrition report, but I have been briefed on its contents.
All right, that's a little bit disappointing, Mr. Petersen, because it really will give you not a technical overview, it will give you a human rights overview of why we are having these discussions here today. Now, one of the reasons I want to flag this, this response to the Human Rights Commission is it provided the Commission with answers to say that there must be a study conducted. We must look into the feasibility. There are trade-offs, etc., etc. Now, you've repeated much today here that we were already provided, and I can just indicate that by Minister Godongwana on the 10th of January 2024. And my first question to you is, has that study, the one issue that the Commission had, was to say, we hear you, Treasury, we understand the trade-offs, and I'll get to this technical language when we speak about children dying of hunger, when we speak about trade-offs. I have a massive concern, Chairperson, of this hearing with the language being used. Now, the Treasury provided us with answers to say, you know, we need to go and have a look at whether there's a feasibility to increase, yes, to the food poverty line, the CSG, and you categorically again stated today there's simply no money. And we understand that. We are very much aware of the fiscal temperature within the country. Then the Commission said, what about a phased-in approach where the 0 to 5 cohort of children are provided with a higher child support grant, which we know that the legislation can also provide for. And the Treasury provided us with a response to say, yes, we have to, you know, there has to be a study conducted, or there has to be a test to see if that is at all feasible. Now, that is my first question, Mr. Pieterse, just to ask, was that study conducted on a phased-in approach to increase a 0 to 5-year-old cohort to access a larger amount of the child support grant? So I want to ask that question, and I'm referring again to the date that we were provided with this report, which is 2024. I'm sure there was almost 2 years, 1 year and 10 months, that we could actually have a proper answer in that. And I'm very encouraged that you indicated right at the outset that you were supported by, and I quote, a technical working group as well from the National Treasury. So that is my first question, Mr. Pieterse. My second comment is, and again, I'm reflecting, and I understand you did not read the full report. And let me just stop sharing my screen. And we will, again, you would certainly have a copy of that letter. We will be able to make available a copy of that letter again. So your language that you were using was unable to accommodate. Why you were not able to reprioritize, and that we will get to the new verification process now. But I have made mention to the fact that the language we are using here, Mr. Pieterse, for me is concerning. The Constitution is very clear. We are making a differentiation, and I want to refer to your differentiation you expressly made between the ECD sector as well as children who are benefiting from the school nutrition program. That one of its the support providing them with this level and extending the national food security or the national school nutrition program makes it tricky to provide the same services to the younger children cohort. Now, for me, and Mr. Pieterse, were you provided with the data from your team as well in terms of the deaths of severe acute malnutrition for the past year and a half? Are you aware of the number?
I'm not sure if I should be answering questions now, or if I should be keeping track of them and then coming back.
I'm just
because you have asked other questions before, so I'm writing some of them down and tracking some of them. So you'll, the chair and yourself will guide me as to when do I respond and when do I.
I just want to know whether you are aware of the number of deaths of children succumbing to severe acute malnutrition of the past year and a half, which was presented under oath by the Department of Health in our previous sitting where we were supposed to meet.
I did not attend the previous sitting, and so I did not see that submission by the Department of Health.
Okay, so you're not aware of that number. All right. So I'm asking you these questions because I want to give you those numbers. I want to speak to the numbers because we can't continue speaking on technical language if we are speaking about thousands of children dying of a severe acute malnutrition. Now, the reason the numbers are important and the language is important is because it seems like the human rights language and the human rights approach is not being prioritized. And you will correct me, Mr. Peterson, when these recommendations received from Cabinet are received and when these considerations are being made. And that is what I'm positing to you, and you are free to differ with me on that as well. Because we have also looked at the verification process that you have introduced here as well. And what I'm hearing is that the thresholds that you've outlined is in fact just going to make it more difficult, and you're going to exclude more families from accessing the child support grant in order to reprioritize and save money so that you can up it at the other end. And perhaps you can give us a little bit more information on that. Will this increase accessibility to the child support grant, or will it exclude families because you are going to lower the threshold or up the amount to less families, if I'm understanding that correctly? Now, what I've also heard is that, and perhaps I can just review my document on this, the verification process that you've also introduced here today in terms of the coordination that you're doing with SASSA. I want to know whether there was a child rights impact assessment prior to undertaking this process. So that is one answer that I'm looking for. And in particular, were you aware that the child support grant uptake for infants under the age of 1 year old has been declining since 2021? And did you consider, along with SASSA and DST, the implications of imposing additional barriers on new child support applicants? Because what we've heard is that there's a runaround for applicants now. They are being sent to a UIF databases, they're being sent to previous employers. And that takes out of the consideration, and in view of we're wanting to save money on the one hand, that this imposes burdens on parents, on children, on families that were not there before. So yes, we hear efficiency, we hear we need to close the gaps, and I quite ironically see that you made mention of anecdotal evidence, whereas on the other hand, we have scientific evidence from the Department of Education and Home Affairs, which for me is quite concerning about the fraud, but we've got children dying on the other hand. But to then, for my better understanding.
Sorry, Chair. I don't want to lose track of some of the important corrections that I need to make. And I would request Mrs. Carter to please stick very faithfully to my remarks. If I recall, and we can go back to the recording, I said that there's anecdotal evidence also supported by research. Those were my earlier remarks. Okay. So I think if you are going to refer to my remarks, I think it's very important to do so accurately for the sake of the integrity of this process.
Mr. Peters, let me withdraw that then. I think when I heard you say anecdotal evidence followed by research, it was quite a contradiction for me. I withdraw, and I apologize. It's Dr. Carter as well. So
it's Dr. Peterson as well.
Wonderful. We can correct that on both sides then. So mine would then let's focus then on the children's rights impact assessment, whether that was done before this process of savings was undertaken. Then let's see, the ECD sector, you've touched on that. I have asked my question on if we can just have a look at the per child under the school nutrition program. What is the per child subsidy under the school nutrition program? If you can assist me with that, if you do have the information at hand. And if you can just assist, I think you said it was an increase now from 17 Rand to 25 Rand. For the ECD sector, I just want that on record.
No, I said 17 to 24.
24, there we go. And then the comment was also made to the amount of additional sites that would make it tricky to roll it out to ECD sector. And I think maybe let me pause there before the other commissioners will come in with follow-up questions. My concern, Mr. Peterse, and with the response of the Treasury as well as I understand we are numbers, we're looking at numbers, but from the Commission side, we are looking at rights. And I want to understand how the department differentiates between access to children at an ECD level and differentiates that the access to children at a school-going level should be different. How do we justify that if the Constitution does not make that differentiation? You can maybe just assist me there, because I do hear that you're saying that those recommendations come from Cabinet, and I am just trying to understand we're speaking research, we're speaking technicalities, but how do we make a differentiation then to say that access to the ECD level learners, the technicalities and the increasing of that subsidy justifies that differentiation between them and the school-going learners? Because in reading our report, you would have seen that there is a massive differentiation because of the fact that they do not get access to these dual support mechanism, which would be the CSG on the one hand side and the National School Nutrition Program on the other side. For now, that is all from my side. Thank you so much, Chairperson of this panel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carter, the Provincial Manager. Dr. Peterse, I must apologize, sir, for addressing you as Mr. Peterse earlier. Thank you also for the correction. From henceforth, I will address you as Dr. Peterse. I will give you the opportunity, Dr. Peterse, to kindly respond to the questions by Dr. Carter, and thereafter we will move to Commissioner Makwatsha. Over to you, Dr. Peterse.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as my colleagues at the Treasury will tell you, you can call me Duncan. No need for the formalities. I was just making the correction in light of what Dr. Carter said earlier. And I would imagine probably for the record, it's quite important as well, but I'm happy for you and the other colleagues to simply refer to me as Duncan. Chair, let me run through some of these questions. I think in Dr. Carter's remarks, I pointed out one misrepresentation of my remarks. There were a few others as well. For example, Dr. Carter mentioned the fact that I said I'm supported by a technical team. I didn't say that. I said that I'm supported here today by the General Counsel and a few other colleagues. So I am a bit worried about a couple of those areas where the remarks that I made were unfortunately misrepresented by Dr. Carter. And as I said earlier, I think it's very important for the integrity of the process that to the extent that my remarks are going to be repeated as part of the questions, they should please be repeated accurately. I think it helps us to have the right kind of conversation. Let me respond now to some of the questions. And let me start with a broader point. It's clear to me that there is some misunderstanding in Dr. Carter's line of questioning of the role of the National Treasury. So perhaps I will start there, and I'll give an example of what I mean. The question was, is a phased-in approach from a child support grant perspective, is changing the structure of the grant, which Dr. Carter said was in line with the legal prescripts, is that possible? And can the Treasury do that? That is not the Treasury's responsibility. Decisions on the structure of grants and the nature of grants is a decision that is made by the Department of Social Development, and they would typically consult the National Treasury because, of course, one of the obligations they have to meet is to ensure that they operate within the broader fiscal framework. So if there are changes that are possible to better target grants, or if there are changes that are possible to improve the efficacy of grants to ensure that the child support grant, for example, reach certain categories of vulnerable groups more effectively than others, that is something that is not the purview or the domain of the National Treasury. That is the purview and the domain of the Department of Social Development from a policy point of view, and then the implementation aspects of that is managed by SASSA. So from my point of view, if there are changes that can be made to the child support grant that's within the law, that will achieve some of the objectives that is sought by the malnutrition report, those certainly should be explored with the Department of Social Development and with SASSA, and provided they fall within the current fiscal framework, that is something that certainly, from a National Treasury point of view, is something we can engage upon. So it's important just to separate the policy role of the National Treasury in terms of advising Cabinet and Parliament on allocations versus the policy role of social development in terms of the structure and targeting of social grants. There was a second comment that was made by Dr. Carter around the fact that in our approach, the human rights approach seems to not be prioritized. And I think that that's completely inaccurate, if I may be so blunt in my assessment. And the reason I say that is because a significant shift was made earlier this year in order to allocate a very large amount of additional resources to the ECD environment, 40% of which will reach nutrition in these centers, providing the right kind of foundation for lifelong learning. And I cannot think of anything that is more human rights centered than the protection of one of the most vulnerable groups in our society, that through the additional resources will result in significantly better outcomes for the country and for the society as a whole. And I think it's also forced us to shift the nature of the conversation around the importance of ECD within the learning ecosystem. And I think in the past there are other elements of our learning ecosystem that have received disproportionate attention relative to the ECD sector, and it's very good that we were able to direct that, to correct that. Sorry. I think the second element is this idea of 60% of non-interest expenditure going to the social wage. I know that Dr. Carter may characterize this as being inappropriately technical, but what that effectively means is that the bulk of the revenue that we collect that is directed into spending goes into supporting basic services, health, education, ECD, and so on. Now, we can have a different conversation about the efficacy of that spending, and that's something that with the relevant line departments we are working on. But the point is the orientation of the budget of the fiscal framework, which allocates 60% of our resources consistently towards the social wage, is very much informed by that human rights approach. And I think if we can as the economy grows and as additional revenue becomes available, the value of that 60% increases. And if we can solve the challenges around the quality of spending, I think we can certainly improve that. In terms of the data questions, I've already responded to some of that. I think certainly there is some additional work here in the report. The various departments were required to contribute different elements to addressing the child malnutrition challenges in the Eastern Cape and more broadly. And I think some of the policy work that I won't respond to resides with those respective departments. Our role, of course, is that as those policy positions are put forward, we engage with those departments on the basis of that evidence, and then make advice or provide advice to Cabinet based on what is affordable, and how we think we can better improve the broader outcomes in the sector. So I think I've touched on all the questions. If there's anything I've missed, Chair, I'm happy for you to indicate what those are, and I can come back to them. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Peterson. I will give the opportunity to Dr. Carter to come back for any follow-up questions later. But for now, let me go to Commissioner Makwasha to see if there are any reflections, comments, or questions from her side. Over to you, Commissioner Makwasha.
Thank you so much, Chairperson of the subpoena hearing. I just have several questions to Dr. Peterson, and I thank him for the presentation. I think my concern is in specifics to the budget allocation as well as the prioritization. The first question is, have there been budget cuts to the nutrition-focused programs in the last medium-term expenditure framework? The second question is, does the Treasury recognize child malnutrition as a national emergency requiring ring-fenced budgeting similar to the emergency response funds? And the other question is, the last question is, in respect of the underspending and mismanagement of the budget allocations, which departments have returned funds to the National Treasury? And once they have done so, what steps has Treasury taken where these departments of provinces have consistently underspent on child nutrition and child-related programs? Where underspending has occurred, has the Treasury relocated these funds and to which programs? So those are my three key issues, and then if Dr. Carter's questions can be allowed, maybe she has got follow-up questions, but those are my key questions: the underspending, budget allocation, and the mismanagement of funds by respective departments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner Makwasha. And perhaps with that, Dr. Peterson, you may also want to add, just to assist, to enlighten us. You mentioned something about a targeted and responsible savings plan or process, which you aim to announce on the 12th this month. One assumes that at this stage you have a sense of how much of that responsible savings plan is going to be allocated to the topic of the day, and in which manner it's going to be distributed across the various entities. Are you able to, in addition to the questions raised by Commissioner Makwasha, also assist us with that understanding? Over to you, Dr. Peterson.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just pull out the questions. Sorry, I'm taking notes here. So let me run through those questions that was asked by the Commissioner. Firstly, have there been budget cuts in some of these areas? I'm going to answer this question in a very general sense, and then I'm going to have to request that if there are elements of specific programs that I need to respond to, I don't have that data offhand, but I can certainly get that data. In general, Chair, the budgets in this sector have been growing. I guess the question is whether they've been growing at rates above inflation or below inflation. If that growth has been below inflation, then that would represent a real cut in those budgets. Even though the budgets are still growing in nominal terms, the budgets would have been cut in real terms because of the impact of inflation, and that then would represent a cut. What I would have to do is, to the extent that the Commissioner is interested in very specific line items, which we don't report on at a high level in our budget, in our main budget documentation, but that kind of detail is available in some of the annexures. That is something that I can certainly look into, and then get back with a very specific written answer on whether specific budgets have been cut. In general, as I said, it's very unlikely that these budgets would have been cut in nominal terms, although it depends on the specific program, but they could have experienced cuts in real terms. And just by way of example, typically the social protection budget would grow at somewhere between 3 to 4% over the medium term. So that would give one a sense of the fact that there is growth in the budget in general, although specific line items may have different impacts. Can we move towards ring-fenced budgeting? We, as a sort of technical principle of the fiscal framework, we typically avoid ring-fenced budgeting, partly because that creates many other challenges. From a spending point of view, it also raises challenges from the point of view that typically a ring-fenced budget would have a dedicated revenue source underpinning it. So you have something like the UIF, which is a ring-fenced budget, but it has a UIF levy that is linked to it, and then that allows that the financing of that ring-fenced budget. The way that we've always approached the social development budget is that it is based on the grants, the thresholds of those grants and the associated conditions, and the number of beneficiaries. And then as those different items change, as the number of beneficiaries change, the grant, the allocation would change, or as the grant conditions would change, those allocations would change. But we typically have not done a ring-fence budget for social development. Then, or for any of the specific grants, I should say. In terms of the question around which departments have returned funds, typically the areas where funds are returned are areas like conditional grants, where departments are given certain conditions that they have to meet in order to spend the funding, and they either don't meet those conditions or they don't have the right kind of capacity to spend. Conditional grants for infrastructure, for example, is a very good example, and those are typically the kinds of funds that are returned. The other category of funds that are typically returned are areas where we have underspending. So departments will have a certain budget, they will have underspent that budget, and then as part of the fiscal process, they'll be given an opportunity to apply for the rollover of those funds into the next year. And if they are successful, they can retain some of that underspending or all of it. And if they are not, the underspending goes into the National Revenue Fund. We, at the time of the MTBPS, which is next week, we will give a detailed account of how much underspending there is and where those areas of underspending is. We don't specifically relocate underspending. So we don't, to the second last question, or the last question by the Commissioner, we don't specifically reallocate. What happens to underspending is that it goes into the National Revenue Fund, and then along with the revenue that was collected, it then constitutes the resources available for the fiscal framework. that then gets allocated under the direction of cabinet, and that's typically how it would work. So there's not a specific principle, for example, that says if there's underspending in infrastructure, those funds have to be relocated to other infrastructure budgets. It goes into the National Revenue Fund. It becomes part of the fiscal envelope, as it were, and it is then allocated under the direction of Cabinet and Parliament. Finally, on TARS and the TARS savings, unfortunately, Chair, you're putting me in a difficult position because I can't really talk about that. We are in the closed period ahead of the budget next week, and so I'm unfortunately not in a position where I can talk about specific elements of the MTBPS. Safe to say that we are going to provide an update on TARS. We're going to provide an update on some of the savings we were able to identify in the short term, and then we're going to demonstrate some of the areas that we think, and the Minister will talk to this as well, where we are able to collect further savings that we can then reprioritize towards areas in need, including in the social sector and elsewhere. So unfortunately, I'm not able to speak to that specific question. Apologies, Chair.
No, thank you very much. That's very much understandable. Dr. Peterse, let me then maybe start with you, Commissioner Makwasha. Any follow-up questions before I go to Dr. Carter?
No follow-up questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Carter?
Chairperson, I think for now, let me, I have not yet received full answers on whether a child impact assessment was done before these extra considerations were placed on the new rollout of the CSG along with SASSA. But in the view of the answers already given and the admissions made, let me rather pause there for now.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Dr. Peterse, that then brings us to the end of our engagement with you this morning. The time is 28 minutes after 10 o'clock, and I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you for a very clear presentation, and as I said, quite well-meaning presentation. We very much appreciate it. And of course, as we usually say, this is not the end of our engagements with you, but it is just a part of the engagements. Should there be any further questions, maybe any further reflections that we have, we will then be in engagements with you. But of course, for now, thank you very much for your time this morning, and we wish you all the best as you move also towards next week. Thank you so much. You may then be excused.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Dr. Carter, let me hand back to you to guide us on the program, please.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Perhaps may I request that we take a 5-minute body break, and then we will return with Mr. Daimani on the platform, who will take us through the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform's presentation. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Colleagues, the time is now 29 minutes after 10 o'clock. Let us return at 35 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you so much. Colleagues, welcome back. Are we all back? Mr. Taimani, are you here? Mr. Taimani? And Dr. Carter, can you hear me?
Good morning, Chair. My apologies. Monica Daimani, I'm in.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Taimani. Welcome. Dr. Carter and Commissioner Makwasha, are you with us?
I'm back. I'm with you.
I'm back, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Welcome back to everyone. Mr. Taimani, I see you are trying to switch on your camera, but it's not on. Can you try again, please? There we go. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Bowman.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you very much for joining us. My name is William Ndobi. I'm a commissioner with the South African Human Rights Commission. I am chairing the proceedings today. I am joined in the panel by Commissioner Sandra Makwasha, as well as Dr. Aiden Carter, who is the provincial manager of the Eastern Cape Office of the South African Human Rights Commission. I am going to hand you over to Commissioner Makwasha for purposes of administering the oath. If you will be making this presentation with any one of your colleagues, or if you expect them to assist you in responding to any of our questions, we will ask you to kindly indicate so that they can also be duly sworn in. Is that understood?
It's understood. Thank you very much. I'll be doing the presentation myself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowman. Over to you, Commissioner Makwasha.
Thank you, Chair of the subpoena hearing. Once again, good morning, sir. Just for the record, your full names.
Good morning, ma'am. Monica Daimani.
So will you be taking the prescribed oath or will you be taking an affirmation?
Will be the prescribed oath.
Just so we understand, just your role, how many years have you been working in this particular position?
I only started in this position in April 2025, but I've been working in the department for the last 11 years.
Thank you. So do you swear that the evidence you're about to give is the truth, nothing but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
Help me God.
Duly sworn in, Chair, you may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner Makwasha. Mr. Taiman, you would have received a set of questions and an outline of the areas around which we wish for you to canvass as we collectively try to address this issue of child malnutrition in the province. We will now give you the opportunity to respond to those questions via your preferred method, and thereafter the panel will engage with you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Let me try and flag the presentation.
As you do, kindly assist with your title. Are you Mr. Taimani, Dr. Taimani, Reverend Taimani?
I'm Mr. Daimani.
Mr. Taimani.
Mr.
Thank you,
Daimani.
Mr. Taimani. Back to you.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to flag it. May I check if the presentation is showing?
The presentation is showing. Maybe you can also then increase it by spreading it to presentation mode. There
Yes.
we go. Please.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for the opportunity. I have prepared a very detailed presentation, but I would not. I'll focus mainly on the areas that we asked. But I think we felt it is important to give you just an overview of the landscape, the agricultural landscape in the province, and so that you can understand the implementation of our programs. Chair, maybe just on the onset, when the study was completed and the recommendations, at that point were known as the Department of Rural Development and Agrarian Reform. In this financial year, there was a shift, and the rural development mandate was moved to the Office of the Premier, and now we are the Department of Agriculture. But that does not have any impact on the work that we do, because the recommendations were very clear to us as the Department of Agriculture to support the province to improve food security, and by doing so deal with the effects of the child malnutrition. So I'll just Chair, as just the introduction, I'll skip the first two slides. Obviously, the constitutional mandate is important. We would want to indicate that that's where we derive our mandate, and we expected to take reasonable legislative and other measures within available resources to achieve progressive realization of the right to have access to sufficient food. This mandate, we exercise it in concurrence with the National Department of Agriculture. Whilst water is very important for us, but water is shared between national and local, and the land is only the national competency. I thought it's important that we flag these because they have an impact on how we perform our functions as a province. Just at the provincial level, Chair, 7th administration took over the 3 priorities, and the one that we're dealing with today, even though it's not mutually exclusive, but is how do we reduce poverty and tackle the high cost of living, which drives food insecurity and child malnutrition in the province. Just for you, Chair, to get a sense, we're a livestock province. Only 7% of the land in this province is suitable for crop production. So you see that a lot of the households in the province that are participating in livestock, and it's mainly because of our landscape, agricultural landscape. I won't dwell too much on that. This slide, Chair, is very important in that it demonstrates that the areas that have potential for crop production is the eastern part of the province. The western part of the province is dry, but as I will show you, a bulk of agricultural economy, employment comes from the western part of the province. It's mainly because they have the infrastructure. The eastern part of the province have no infrastructure, and that is what inhibits a lot of small and communal farmers to participate meaningfully in the sector. As we have that potential, you can see the land is degraded, which influence the infrastructure that enables us to drive agriculture. So if you have 1.6 million hectares of land that are dongas or degraded, it limits your potential. And you can see the eastern part of the province where the potential is, that this is where this challenge is. It worsens our infrastructure backlog in the province, particularly your farm access roads in deep rural areas. Chair, we've taken note of the study as presented, and I would not want to dwell on that because it's a matter that we're here for. I must say, Chair, the National Department and the province took this study very seriously to the extent that there was a National Food Nutrition Security Survey that was conducted in 2023. It was not different from the report from the Human Rights Commission, because it demonstrated that almost all our districts are affected by severe food insecurity. And if you look at the size, more than 420 households that are severe food insecure. Which gives us and this, Chair, happens in a province where there's been a steady growth in the agricultural sector in terms of the commercial side, which is driven by the western part of the province. But that growth, without getting into details on the numbers here, it's not inclusive because it's happening when the western part of the province is mainly driven by commercial farmers. The bulk of our smallholder farmers, as you can see in this slide, their contribution is negligent. It's about 11% and 13%. So it is not inclusive to the extent that it can help us to address issues of food insecurity, because it leaves the eastern part of the Eastern Cape still far behind in terms of growth. Even in terms of income and employment, you can see the Eastern Cape is not there, which is the major contributing factor to food access. Because I think we all accept that the country is a net exporter of food. That means there is food. The biggest problem is the food access, because of the high cost of food, and mainly in rural areas, because there is no sufficient local production. So even your grant recipient, when they receive their money, they must use that money to travel to the nearest town, which then take from the disposable income that they should be using, let alone that even the grant is not enough.
Mr. Taimani, apologies. Yes. We have lost sight of the slides on the screen.
My apologies.
Not a problem. I also saw Dr. Carter's hand was up. Dr. Carter, while...
It was just to raise that. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. And if we can also just have a copy of that presentation, Mr. Taimani, had you sent it to our officials just so that we are able to follow and make notes where need be?
I'll send it, Chair. My apologies. I'm just trying to get back to a stage where I can load it again.
Okay, maybe let us give you 2 minutes to compose yourself. You can start by sending that presentation, and once you have sent it, then you can proceed.
Okay, let me do that, Chair. Chair, I'll let me, Chair, kindly alert me when I have to start. Again, my apologies. What is
Not a
I've also
problem.
asked the office to share the presentation.
You have now sent it.
Yes, I may just check with my secretary if she has already sent it. I've asked her to share immediately. If you can give me a minute just to go to her, just to ask her if she has sent.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Thank you. Thank you very much. She's going to send it to Nomatem.
You may proceed, sir.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I passed this slide because I was making the point that whilst the sector is growing, the black smallholder farmers and communal are lagging behind, particularly in the eastern part of the province because of the infrastructure, agriculture infrastructure, but also the enabling infrastructure that helps them to be competitive. So I was just making the point, even on employment, when you compare us with other provinces, both employment and income is fairly low, taking into account our potential. And I'm making this point purely because employment is very important as a contributing factor to address food insecurity and child malnutrition. So I'll quickly just indicate to you what are we doing to deal with these issues, because as a province, we need to come up with initiatives that will enable people to get employment, because if they don't, they will not have any income, which is key to the recommendations that were made by the Human Rights Commission. So we're targeting land reform farms, because a lot of people were given farms, but they are not able to operate them. They are not productive. They are lying fallow. So we're partnering with these DFIs to fund black smallholder farmers in order to make those farms productive, to produce food, but also to create employment. So we've done that with the Land Bank, ECDC, which is the Provincial Development Finance Institution, and SEFTA, in partnership with our own agency, which is the ECRDA. As you can see, Chair, there are about 29 agribusinesses that were supported. Those are farmers, specifically 54 from SEFTA and about 25 on the Land Bank. And the partners is when the communal people aggregate land at a scale in order to produce as a group and also to reduce the cost. Those are the partners that the Land Bank is supporting. One of the big issues, Chair, in the province, the reason why, as I said, the reason why we're experiencing food insecurity to the extent of child malnutrition is because in areas where we live, in deep rural areas, we're not producing sufficiently, to the extent that we are now forced to go outside to buy food. And we have in the province irrigation schemes, land of 10,000 hectares with water that is not put under production. And now what we are trying to do, we are trying to put that land under production. And that land is mainly producing vegetable. There's dairy that is in that land. There's as I said, vegetable, but we are working with Infrastructure South Africa to help us to apply for the BFI, for the infrastructure that is needed to make these schemes operational. They were operational in the past, they're experiencing problems. And those schemes, as you can see, they're in the areas where there is child malnutrition. So in OR Tambo, we're targeting Port St. John's because there are smaller schemes there that are producing good vegetable. And in the Amatole region, there's Zanyokwe, in Chiskama, and also in the Christian side, there's Noha, Bilaje. So those are the targeted schemes that would enable us to produce enough food where we live to a point where it can then force the decline of food prices, not necessarily decline, but will help people to buy food where they stay rather than to spend money to go out to rural areas. Then the point that I wanted to make sure is that we as a department, we've done a bit of analysis. We've realized that the province is receiving on conditional grant about 34 billion rand. And when we analyze it, we realize that 44% of this grant is used for food items. And some of the food items that we are using this money for are food items that we can, as a province, produce at a volume. And when we calculated that, we realized that we can easily get 12 billion rands circulating within the province, and that could help us a great deal to deal with the issues of food security. As I said, we're targeting to use the most arable land available, which is our conditional grant. So we've then moved to say, well, if we want to do this, we must target at least 4 billion per annum. We are pushing government of the province to ring fence a food government nutrition program to procure directly from these farmers. Our provincial treasurer is looking at that. If we get that right, we'll be able to have at least 4,500 smallholder farmers in the value chain of food. I'm using the example, if we are school nutrition, if we do school gardens and the school nutrition budget is used to buy in those school gardens and also in the irrigation scheme, it enables not only the kids at school, but communities around to have access to this food at a far cheaper price. We've signed agreements with some social development and South African National Defence Force, and we are engaging with the Provincial Department of Health and Education in order to have a structured arrangement on how this could happen. We're doing this, Chair, because when you look at the province, in our schemes, we have 16 million litres of milk that are produced on a monthly basis. The unfortunate part about this milk is that it's taken by the big players. It's not processed where it's produced, to the extent that even though it's produced in Alice, in our dairy there, it's owned by a community. It goes to Ocha, it comes back as milk that we must buy. What, as a province, we are offering the community to provide them with the pasteurizing equipment and also processing equipment so that they can process that milk and be able to get it at a far cheaper rate near where they are. And we see no reason why schools and hospitals cannot do the same. The same applies on vegetable. We have 10,000 tons of vegetable production that we produce in the schemes. Next one is Zanyokwe here. We're saying that should be used as a low-hanging fruit instead of going to the retailers. So is our broilers, layers, and eggs, beef, and also we have some fruit in the province. So those are the initiatives that we are taking as a province to increase local food production and allow and put pressure on government to consider them, because once government start procuring from them, you're more likely to see the growth of that, and a lot of people within the local space will have access to food. We're saying that, Chair, because the people of the province, they are into agriculture. We are the second, other than KZN, where you have households that are involved in the agricultural sector. We see this as a plus for us, and it's something that must be nurtured. If you move from that, you'll see we're saying this must happen because we have access to 67% of the land. Unfortunately, as we stand, we're only using 37% of that land. And the reason for that, Chair, is that one, obviously the province, especially the eastern part, where this issue is, we have a big problem of agriculture infrastructure. It's not there. Number two, we do not have the enabling infrastructure in terms of roads. That's one of the challenges that makes people not to be able to use the land that is readily available. The third thing, Chair, I'll rush through it, is the cost of production. If you can see, seeds, fertilizer, fuel have been going up, and that creates a barrier for a household to produce. Today, if we are to produce a household, the first thing that you must do, you must get them a fencing, fence the entire garden, and then provide them with production inputs, fertilizers, and also mechanization. They are very expensive. We want to provide a shared service to all of them. I'm just giving you a sense why, when we have so much land, why are we not able to use that land effectively? And we are very slow in terms of progress. I'll move to that. And now, Chair, coming to the key issue of how do we work as a province in addressing this? As a province, we've developed a provincial food and nutrition plan, and we have identified specific activities that we must integrate our work. So we are focusing on the 39 poorest wards identified as priority. We work closely with the national and provincial Department of Social Development. We are trying to broaden the integrated school health program. And in this case, our approach, Chair, is whilst social development provide readily made meals for people, we are coming in on the developmental side to see how can we help those people to start working their gardens. It is not an easy exercise because people that are receiving food packs are not always interested to do agricultural work, but there are those that are. That's the link that we want to find. The same applies with schools. The same applies with hospitals, and where there are community nutrition development centers, we want to link them with household gardens and smallholder farmers that are producing food. We are also driving EPWP programs as employment creation, increasing their income so that they can also be able to participate in food production. The key thing, Chair, is if you start agricultural production, on average, you'll have to wait for about 3 or 4 months before you can harvest. And between that time, you need to sustain yourself. That is the link that we want to get to with all these departments of the province. Chair, the province, responding to the Human Rights Commission, we've now developed a program called Ilima Lokulima, and that program basically is about a community coming together and say there should not be anyone in our community without food, and helping each other to produce as a group in their own different gardens, they must be at least between 20 to 100 within a 5-kilometer radius, where they would be producing different varieties of food. It could be vegetable, it could be poultry, it could be piggery, it could be livestock, so that they can be able to exchange things amongst themselves. We want to build the capacity of the community to address food insecurity rather than to only look at individuals. And that is the program that we would want to run at least for the next 3-4 years. The target is to target about 100,000 of them, but obviously within the resources that we have as a department. Of course, there are a lot of partnership that we are pushing in order to get to that, and they are across the province, particularly in the areas that have been identified. The second one is, how do we increase entrepreneurship within the farmers? So there's a program that we are running, a smallholder horticulture empowerment and promotion program. It's supported by the National Department and the Japanese government, where in the province we have about 1,285 participants. They are mainly focusing on vegetable production. They are linked to the market. They produce to sell. So if you produce to sell, obviously you must have the, what do you call it, the surplus. The third one is the link to school gardens. We have agreed with the Department of Education that we would be supporting their gardens. They've given us a list of 4,749 schools in the province that we must provide support, because their school nutrition funds, they are not able to use it to buy production inputs or mechanization. However, they can use that money to buy from those that are producing. So we have agreed that we will be supporting those schools on condition that all of the vegetables that will be produced in those schools will then be bought at a far cheaper, reasonable prices to feed the children in all the schools that have been identified. Obviously, there was a readiness process to look at whether those schools are ready, but our focus is targeting those that have been identified in the report. We assign our extension officers there to be able to provide technical support to schools. If I move the whole notion of ILIMA, as I said, is to strengthen communities to produce their own food. We build local leadership, collaboration with traditional leaders, NPOs, other government departments. When they do that, they will then pull all the rest of the resources, share profit, which will make them to be sustainable, increase their bargaining power when they buy production inputs, and promote economic inclusion. The specifics of this program, Chair, as follows. Ever since September 2023, you will see that the first one, promote household food production. We have projects that we have implemented to drive that, your household food production, where we increase the capacity of households to produce their own food. The target, we have partners there with NGOs, Department of Education, DSD, social development churches, traditional authorities, and we are able to achieve more than 30,000 households. We partnered with the National Department of Agriculture. They were implementing a presidential employment stimulus program that they've implemented in the province, where they've given production inputs to 12,000 households, targeting specifically those areas that were adversely affected by food insecurity and malnutrition. We've also worked with the National Department on climate smart boxes, where we've given 27 climate smart tunnels to youth and women, so to enable them to produce all year round, rather than to simply produce only in summer when there's rain. even though there's water that they can use. So we've done that. As I said, when we increase household income, that is where we have partnered with the National Department to implement smallholder horticulture empowerment promotion, which is focusing on household vegetables for entrepreneurship, to not only produce to consume, but you also produce for the market as well. We've done the aggregation of communal lands for grain production in the province, and we were about 8,523 households benefited. We've planted more than 10,000 hectares of land. More than 41,000 tons of maize were produced. And because we're also looking at poultry and protein, and biggest problem there is the cost of feed. So we've supported farmers to produce oil seeds that they can use as feed for their poultry. They've done that, and they've done about 4,672 tons of that. We have also supported poultry production in the province, where we have identified households. They become enterprises, because they must consume, but also to sell, both chicken and also eggs. And those were the numbers to help farmers to get water in order to produce. If you look at the province, there are areas where there are spring water, springs all over. The department, working with the community, we harness those springs water, connect them with pipe, and connect households so that they can have access to water, but for consumption, but also for production. We've done 10 of them, and it benefited about 1,879 households. And once those households have got water, we provide them with production inputs. Then the employment, because employment is key. EPWP, we do get a EPWP grant from National Department and Department of Public Works, and we have provided opportunities for employment for 3,500 people. If you look at where these people are, Chair, because this is very important, you see that those they are targeting the entire province, starting from Alfred Nzo, Amatole, Chrisani, Jogabi, OR Tambo, and Sarah Patman, both in terms of the household that participated, but also those households that have bigger plots of land, and they are now producing bigger areas than others. Most important thing, Chair, is that when you start a new area of production, you must provide fencing. And that is what is driving the cost of production in starting new projects in the province. But we are determined to do that. We believe if we increase these production areas, we're definitely going to affect the cost of food, as people will receive it. This is just to give you a sense, share of the share program and these producers and where they are selling their products, their produce now. Just for you to get a sense of this program. If I move, we've also, as I said, we're also on poultry, because poultry is good for protein, and there's a lot of people
to us, and also the commitment from the department in an understanding of the Commission's report. I'm very, very grateful for that. So my first question to you, Mr. Daimani, is since the initial engagements a few years ago, the Commission was provided with the identification of, and I sometimes have nightmares when I think about this because we are a few years on as well, of 39 wards. We had this in 2021, 22, and in 2025, unfortunately, we're still sitting and we're referring to the 39 wards that are receiving quite some extensive assistance from all the department, all the sister and coordinating departments. Mine is to ask your insights into why are we still sitting with only the 39? Is it because we have a lack of data, targeted data to extend this focused intervention? Or what is preventing us? Because surely we know from the outlook of the province as well, that the Premier has also shared, that the poverty level and the poverty level is just increasing, unemployment is increasing. So our suspicion is then obviously that the 39 wards that are in dire need of assistance must have been increasing in the past 4 years. So perhaps you can assist me just to better understand, is it lack of data, is it lack of coordination? Are we able to scale from your perception, your understanding from your presentation as well, that 39 wards? Because I do think it might be time that we increase the number of the focus. Now, I want to ask you as well in terms of your assessment, and you've been playing a very key role in the rollout of all of these programs and the recommendations that we've made. And we also note that you've been working closely with your national department. Again, I want to reflect our gratitude for that, because that was one of the key recommendations we made. I want to ask you, from a coordination point of view, provincially though, is there still an issue? Because I recall the Premier during his submission, he indicated that we are moving, what the Commission basically called for a rapid response team, and the Premier then indicated towards a command center. I want to know from your side, are you actively participating in any other structure that would almost rely on the urgency of these issues? Again, I'm going to reflect on my previous submissions here, Mr. Daimani. We are speaking about children dying of hunger. And that is the key message the Commission keeps on going back to, because we cannot be allowed to ever lose sight of that. So I want to ask, from your point of view, being very much involved in the rollout of all of these programs, has there been a program in the Office of the Premier that is being coordinated that is akin to either a rapid response team or a command center to address this issue specifically? I just want to underscore that I've heard you mention two things persistently. The number one issue is roads infrastructure. And I know you are also aware that the Commission issued a very clear report, the report in which Commissioner Tuli, the chair panel, was the panel chair as well, and Commissioner Makwasha assisted us in the releasing of that report. So we are very much on the ground as well, focusing on this roads infrastructure issue. Perhaps I want to ask your wisdom as well. Have you seen an improvement? We issued that report a year ago. We have also received from the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission approval to consider starting a subpoena process to unpack the concerns about road infrastructure and the implementation, similarly like we're doing here, the implementation of that report. So I'm asking, from your perspective, have you seen an improvement? And what would be your outlook on where we are as a province? We know that only 9% of the province is paved. Then I just want to indicate to you that I hear that one of the things that is causing you grey hairs is fencing, and it was echoed on a number of your slides, and it's something we will also reflect on, that impacts on a lot of the issues that you have discussed, and for me it's enlightening because it does inform a few of our thought processes as well. So with those questions, Mr. Daimani, if I can ask you to provide me with insight, The data that was provided by the Department of Health indicated that from a period of 2024 and then up until July 2025, we were already sitting with basically 1,000 children dying of malnutrition in the country. In the Eastern Cape, it was 2024, 107, and it was up to July, and obviously certainly this month we are definitely looking at higher than 200. But I'm creating that context again, but I know you're aware of the context, luckily. I'm asking, with all of this that we can see that you are doing, we're still looking at no decline in malnutrition deaths. And is there something in your wheelhouse of having dealt with this now, as I hear also you've been with the department for more than a decade, that you would recommend we also zoom into? Because from our purview, it does not seem like we're moving quick enough to save the lives of children in what we deem is a preventable issue. Thank you so much, sir. Over to you. Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Provincial Manager Dr. Carter, for your questions. Before I go to Commissioner Makwasha, Mr. Daimani, let me give you the opportunity so we don't overwhelm you with questions. Let me give you the opportunity to respond to the questions of Dr. Carter first. Over to you.
No, thank you very much, Chair. And we also appreciate the questions, Chair. Let me start with the first one. Chair, the 39 wards in the province. If you look at the approach that we are taking as a province in dealing with food insecurity, which lead to child malnutrition, it's a very unfortunate. Is that the data that we use come directly from both national and the provincial Department of Social Development. And that is where I think a big focus is on food packs. And I must admit, we have not achieved the desired impact on linking those people that are receiving food packs and the developmental programs. Hence, the mitigation now is to build communities to produce food in and around those areas. So they go beyond the areas where the 39 wards. We are trying to exploit, for instance, the 10,000 hectares of land in irrigated areas where there's water. But the only challenge in some of them is community conflicts due to land tenure issues. So you get Noha, for instance, in Krisani, they have water in 2,500 hectares, but they are only using a quarter of that for dairy. The rest of the land is used informally. Whenever you want to bring a partner that can help to produce the entire area, there is a community conflict, because that, if you're able to do that, you will then be able to make food available in the surrounding areas. So that has been the challenge in some instances, but there is also from our side as a department in commitment to start doing our own surveys rather than to rely on surveys that we are given by other departments, because that will then enable us to understand from the production point of view, how do we get young people to participate throughout and reduce the social ills of money, because in some instances, you get information that a bit of money is used for alcohol and substance abuse in areas of where there's an acute need for food. So that is how, as a department, we're going to look into that, because we would want to build a resilience that over time would be able to reduce the number of these wards and increase the areas that are food secure. If you move to the next one, the issue around rapid response, Chair, I think the Office of the Premier have done ever since have coordinated us coherently, in my view. We're able to ensure that we have a one provincial food and nutrition plan, and help us to sequence our activities in an integrated way. The big issue that I see is just that the resourcing of this department, particularly if you look at the agriculture department, which mainly depend on conditional grant, has not necessarily, we have not yet received resources that are equal to the task that we are facing. Now, we are obviously trying to get partners to assist, but I think the coordination for me is adequate. I think they are providing the leadership and coordination. Where we have been engaging them, how best to increase the funding so that we can reach as many people as we can in the province. On the third one, Chair, the rural roads, there's been improvement, Chair. I sit in a working group, I chair a working group called Agriculture Commercialization and Food Security. And in there, we have a standing item of access roads, and the Department of Transport have identified roads that they are working in the province, and they provide report on a regular basis. And that report, I also use it when I engage Agri-Eastern Cape, because Agri-Eastern Cape is also our partner as well when we were on this. So there has been, and I do also suspect, Chair, that even for transport, the biggest challenge is the funding. When I speak to the HOD, he's always willing, but he says the funding that they receive is far below the need if you look at the province. Yes, Chair, fencing is the big issue. It's a big issue, and we have been now advised by our own portfolio committee that before we start a project, we must make sure that we've done proper social facilitation, we've trained people, so that when they receive this infrastructure, they're able to use them for the purpose that they were intended for. Because in some instances, in some districts where we've provided infrastructure, a year or two after that, people stop producing. And you go and check, sometimes you realize that some people have taken the fence for their own RTP houses. And that is really disturbing, but we are engaging both local communities, traditional leaders, and NPOs to ensure that communities own the infrastructure that they've been given, and they are using that optimally. Chair, it's one of those things that keeps us in this sector awake at night. The issues of child malnutrition. We all agree it is not acceptable at this point that we still have kids that are losing their lives because of this. We would want to see improvement, and as you can see, our ambition towards the end of my slide, we're saying, well, if we have 420,000 people in the province that are experiencing severe food insecurity, you've got to build a food hubs, at least at a bare minimum. Half of that must be targeted for food production, because once you do that, they will be able then to have effect on the other 200,000. It's as I said, we always, every time we present our annual report, unfortunately we have been able to get clean audit for the last 4 years, but there's always this question. You have a clean audit, but here's the report. How do you deal with it? And the only response we have, we can only account for the resources that we have. And I think it needs the entire whole of government and society to deal with this. I would want to see business, people of the Eastern Cape, adopting some of these rural areas where this is the issue and work with government to address it. That is how I would want Chair, and obviously the Honourable Premier is providing leadership with respect to that, engaging all sectors of society to assist us in addressing this. But the most important thing is that if we are not able to increase local food production, then we're making our people vulnerable, because they will have to get things from outside. If the province can be able to do that consistently over the next 2 years, you're more likely to see changes for the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daimani. Dr. Carter, do you have any follow-up questions to those responses?
Nothing from my side, Chairperson. They were very clear, and here and there were actually actionable recommendations as well. So again, my gratitude to Mr. Daimani.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let me then go to Commissioner Makwasha. Commissioner Makwasha, I now hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Ntuli, Chair of the subpoena hearing. I have no questions. I'm covered by Dr. Carter, as well as the well-presented presentation from Mr. Daimani. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Makwasha. Mr. Daimani, I would be interested to understand what we mean when we say that 44% of the child support grant is used on food items that can be produced. One would like to understand which of those food items do we mean. So what is the majority of food items that this 44% is being spent on? And of course, one would want to understand that in relation to the program you have on household gardens, as well as the reviving of school gardens. So in terms of the food items that are being spent in the child support grant, are you complementing their assessment with the household garden support program? So are you feeding the seeds that are complementary to these food items you are saying can be grown, which are being used to spend on the child support grant? And similarly to that, one would want to understand, you say one of your recommendations or aims is to revive close to 5,000 schools. We had this discussion with the Premier of the Eastern Cape in September, and this is a strong position of the Human Rights Commission that certainly the land that is available in schools and the doing away of the garden programs in schools has certainly added to the challenges that we have with child malnutrition. And reviving those programs can assist us in a great manner in addressing these challenges. So one would want to understand from yourselves, when you say you intend to revive that school garden program, one would want to understand, why was the program stopped in the first place? Secondly, you aim to revive 5,000 of those school gardens. The question is, against how many schools? So how are you distributing the 5,000 across the various districts in the province? And then, of course, related to that is there a relationship between the food items you aim to grow in the school programs and food items that are being spent on the child support grant? And then, of course, this also goes to this idea of production inputs that you aim to support 12,000 households with. What exactly are these inputs that you are envisaging? And the reason these questions are important to us as a commission is because at an ideological and policy level, the commission is advancing this notion of food sovereignty, which we distinguish from food security and the right to food in its historic interpretation as the right to be fed, where industry produces and feeds people and creates and sustains a culture of dependency and a culture of handouts. And this is in opposition, direct opposition to the notion of food sovereignty, which is the right of people to take control of their food systems, to reintroduce a culture of independence amongst people. And certainly one of those ways to achieve food sovereignty is through the inculcation of a culture of household gardens or school gardens, which of course then will address some of these challenges you have identified, where 44% of the child support grant is being used on these food items that could, of course, relieve those funds to address other challenges. So one is very, very interested in your presentation insofar as it can help us understand how to move towards food sovereignty. If maybe then you can assist us with those questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the questions. Much appreciated. Chair, the food items that people buy from the commissioner grants that we're not producing in the province. One, it will be sugar. We don't produce sugar. We don't produce wheat, so we don't produce bread. We don't produce rice. Those that we are very strong and we are producing in the province, it's vegetable, which is key for nutritious food. We produce that. We produce poultry and piggery. We produce them. Hence, we are also providing oil seeds for people to do that. We obviously, as expensive as it is, we produce red meat. It's what we have. The idea is that you target where you can best produce these things, because once people start to sell them, they will be able to exchange for the things that they're not able to produce. We produce milk. I think the Eastern Cape is a coastal province. We produce a lot of milk. We produce a lot of fruit. If you look at our western Upper Matole, from Matole, you go through to the western part of the province, Arabatman, that's where you get your citrus and deciduous fruit that we produce. So the idea is that those things that we're able to produce, we must produce them in volumes so that people can access them here, and they must be enable them to produce those things, and not to get someone else to produce and suddenly they just become consumers and buyers. That's the idea. So all these households, the support is to enable them to produce those things at a quantity, but also at the right quality. Hence, we give them what we call GAP, good agricultural practice, so that though you guard food safety at all costs in their production. So they are linked to schools as well. The schools that we are targeting, we are targeting these schools in phases with the Department of Education. So what we're trying to do is we do the assessment of schools, looking, of course, at the available budget from our side, and say for this 3 years, we can be able to take this number of schools, where we will obviously provide our scientists to do all the assessment in terms of the ability of the land to produce. But all those things, the focus is greatly on variety of vegetables that can be produced consistently throughout the year, because we'll also be assisting them with water harvesting and a bit of irrigation so that they can be able to irrigate. So that is where the big target is. And we think that if there could be a way where provincial government and schools can start buying from these farmers who are producing at this scale. If the province is producing 16 million liters of milk, and that milk is produced as a nyokwe in Kiskamahook, Whittlesea in Krisani, Ngocha in Tofimvam. One just imagines if that milk could then be bought by schools around and it's processed there, how many jobs could be created, and the changes that it will have on people. For some of us grew up just eating milk and pap, and it's the staple food of those. But also it will also generate income. So that is the approach. On why this project was stopped, Chair, I would not at this point know why this project was stopped, because at this point, as the recommendations of the report, we had to revive them, seeing how important they are in the fight against food insecurity. We also trying to do the same with health and education, because there are health facilities that have land, that land can be easily used for this. And one of the things that we have made mention of was obviously the security and the ownership that must be taken by a school or any institution that wants to become part of this program. The production inputs that we provide, Chair, is your seed, fertilizer, seedlings, chemicals. Those are the production inputs. But of course, our scientists in our district will have to do a bit of work around the soil tests, so that when people are doing these things, they know how much they could be putting on the soil, so that they do things in a more efficient manner, because these are very expensive. Chair, I fully concur with your sentiment around food sovereignty, and I think our NEC, when she came up with Ilima Lokulima, she was also pushing that, because I think we would want our communities not to be seen as a market that simply buys everything. They must also be able to produce and be able to sell. And we really believe that if the systems of government collaboratively can be integrated, they will in a medium to a long term achieve that. Chair, those are the responses, Chair. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Taimani, for those responses, which are quite clear. Commissioner Makwasha and Dr. Kata, are there any further follow-up questions from yourselves?
Not from me. I'm covered. Thank you.
I'm covered as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Makwasha, as well as Dr. Kata. Mr. Taimani, as I had indicated earlier to Dr. Peterson, this brings us to the end of our engagement, but as we end, this is not the end of our discussions with you. It is a pause. If there are any follow-up questions, any reflections that we want to further engage you on, we will be in touch with you. But for purposes of today's engagements, thank you very much for a very clear, comprehensive presentation that does, as Dr. Carter said, show and reveal to us that there is work being done, and much of then what needs to be done is to monitor the implementation of these plans. We are also quite pleased at the focus that you are placing in your programs on giving communities back the power to produce food themselves, so that we can do away with this culture of dependency, where communities rely on being fed, where communities are dependent on either the private sector or the state in order to enjoy and claim their rights. So thank you so much for this presentation. We very much appreciate it, and of course we will continue to monitor the implementation of these plans. And through Dr. Carter, we will periodically write to you to receive or to request reports on the extent to which you would have succeeded in implementing these plans. With that, thank you so much. You now may be excused.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to all the commissioners. Thank you
so much. Dr. Carter, let me hand back to you to assist us with the program at this stage.
Thank you, Commissioner and Commissioner Makwasha. That brings us to the end of the subpoena hearings for the implementation of the SAHRC's malnutrition report and the follow-up engagements. We have heard from a number of departments, Commissioner. Let me not perhaps preempt your closing remarks, but we now have a register and a record of all submissions received by these departments. The Commission will now, with the assistance of the Chairperson and Commissioner Makwasha, reflect on these records in as far as they pertain to the implementation of the obligation on state departments when it comes to not only the rights of children, but the Section 27 rights contained in the Bill of Rights as well. So from my side, Commissioner Pilile Ntuli, as well as Commissioner Makwasha, that would be at the end of the hearing from the departments. As you've indicated, we will be engaging, especially where we feel that there has been no real substantive response to the Commission's concerns and questions. We will be making follow-ups with those departments on the side as well to better assist us in what our next step will be in respect of taking steps towards redress on what we can clearly all agree remains a big concern within not only the province, but also the country. So from my side, Commissioner Makwasha and Chairperson of this inquiry, Commissioner Ntuli, and from the Eastern Cape team, that would bring us to the end of this process. Over to you, Commissioner Ntuli.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Carter, for those remarks, which are very much appreciated. With that, then I will hand over to Commissioner Makwasha to offer us her closing remarks, and thereafter we will, as directed by yourself, Dr. Kata, deliberate as the panel further on the presentations we would have received today as well as in September. Commissioner Makwasha, over to you.
Thank you so much to the chairperson of the inquiry as well as the provincial manager. As we conclude today's sitting of our subpoena hearing into malnutrition, we wish to extend our sincere appreciation for the frank and substantive engagements we have received from both the National Treasury as well as the Department of Agriculture. It's quite important that the Department of Agriculture outlined food security initiatives, small-scale farming support, as well as the Agricultural Extension Program. The submission made it clear that food security is not about production. It is not only about production, but also about equitable distribution, market access, nutrition, and resilience in the face of climate change. The Eastern Cape being one of the provinces with high levels of unemployment, population of young persons, youth, need to ensure that we are able to give them not only access to nutrition, but also food sovereignty as well as food security. Today, we understand the need to ensure that despite movements from government departments, despite written submissions and policy discussions, children cannot continue to die from preventable malnutrition. Children cannot suffer from health issues such as stunting as a result of malnutrition. The province experiences systematic failures and in early detection and intervention. Rural and food insecurity in respect of households results in households remaining independent or dependent on unsustainable and often unsafe food sources, and the need for coordination between the departments at national and provincial level to ensure that their response is not fragmented, leading to delays, duplication, or inefficiencies. The Constitution is explicit. No child in South Africa should be dying of hunger. Malnutrition is one of the clearest indications of inequality, governance failure, and erosion of dignity. It is therefore not a simple health issue, but a human rights issue. Today, we acknowledge the commitments made by the respective departments. The Commission will now consolidate all the evidence received, including written submissions, into formal findings and recommendations. Where there are systematic failures, non-compliance with constitutional obligations, or lapses in service delivery, the Commission will not hesitate to issue directives or seek enforcement through appropriate legal mechanisms. Thank you so much once again to the chairperson for leading this. And once again, we need to re-emphasize the most important point. Children cannot eat promises. Vulnerable householders cannot survive on policy documents. We expect measurable action, improved coordination, and strengthened budgeting priorities that treat malnutrition as a national emergency and a societal priority. We will continue, Chair, as the Human Rights Commission, through the commissioners, through our provincial managers, to monitor, to report, and where necessary to intervene. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Makwasha, for the closing remarks. With that, then there's nothing else for me to say except to officially declare this subpoena hearing adjourned. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you so much, Chair.